I'm Everett Kelley. I was born in Miami, Florida in 1966, and I was initially drafted, and then I enlisted in January of 1966.
Why did you decide to enlist? Did you rather just pick where you were going to go?
I was drafted, and I was given an opportunity to choose an MOS.
Oh, okay. And what is an MOS?
That's a military occupational skill.
Oh, right. Okay, so you then enlisted into what branch?
I enlisted to go into ordnance, into mechanics, but it turned out to be electronics.
Okay. Was that through the military?
Yes.
The Army, or
In the Army.
in the
yes.
Army? Okay. All right. You can tell me a little bit about your family background. So you grew up in Miami. Are you an only child? Do you have any siblings?
No, I had 6 siblings, 2 sisters, and 4 other brothers.
Oh, wow. Big family. So are you the only one that went into the military?
No, I had a younger brother go into the military, but I was the only one that made it a career.
How long were you in the service for?
22 and a half years.
Wow, that's a long time. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So had you had any knowledge of the Korean War, from 50 to 53, what was going on prior to your enlistment?
Well, not really. I was drafted during the Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Korea after I had been in the service for a few years.
When did you go to Korea?
I went to Korea in, I think, August of 1976.
And where were you stationed at?
Camp Carroll, U.S. Military Depot.
And do you remember where that was at? What
It
part of
was in
Korea?
a place called Sukchong-dong.
So were you nervous to go to Korea or by any chance?
No.
Where did you arrive at did you fly into Incheon or?
I flew into Seoul,
Mhm.
and at the airport there.
And how long were you in Korea for?
The first time I was there for 1 year, and the second time I was there for 2 years.
How far apart in between the two tours?
2 tours, I was there in 76, 10 years, and back in 86. Or, yeah, 86 to, no, that would have been 85 to 87.
Okay. Did you request to go back to Korea the second time? Or?
I never requested any assignments while I was on active duty. I was always assigned to every station I've ever been.
What was your first impression whenever you arrived to Korea?
That's a very difficult statement to make because it's a very populated area. When you first come in there, it seems that there are millions of people in Seoul. And then when you go through your processing, you already know where you're headed. And you get to your place of duty. The first time in 76, it was pretty isolated. We had curfews. You couldn't go out after a certain hour of the evening, or if you were out, you couldn't come in, things of that nature. So it was different, but it was something that a soldier could get used to.
Please, will you tell me a little bit more about your responsibility? What was your main occupation and what were you responsible for?
Well, initially, as a warrant officer, I was a newly appointed warrant officer in the Army. I was a W-1, and when I got to Korea, I was in charge of the, how shall I say, what we call the maintenance operations branch. And I was assigning technical electronic type of work. And if you know anything about calibration, we do a lot of work on weapon support equipment that is all electronic in nature, but it has to be set to precision measurements. And so that was my job, to make sure that those processes were carried out properly.
How are the living conditions while you're in Korea as far as food, sleeping, clothing, weather?
Well, when I was in Korea, I must say we lived on the base at Camp Carroll. We had our own individual BOQs. Living conditions were, I would say, kind of isolated and not a lot of social activity.
Do you recall how much you were getting paid?
Not enough. Not really. Go ahead.
Were you able to exchange letters back home with your family pretty easily?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. The mail was going very well at that time.
And how was the relationship with other troops that you were there with, including Korean soldiers?
We had some Korean soldiers assigned to, they were called the rock soldiers, and we had Katusas as well. And so the relationship, they were pretty much, they were in their area and we were in our area. And when we would see each other in the gym and places like that, you know. And some of us, we participated in sports activities together, things like that.
What were some of the what were the contributions made by the U.S. military in Korea post '53? What were they trying to do or maintain while in Korea at that time?
I think the main thing we were doing was trying to maintain the peace between the North and the South, and make sure that there was a readiness level that was maintained as high as possible, a high standard of readiness.
Did you ever encounter any dangerous or difficult situations?
Aside from nearly being killed in an automobile accident there, no.
What happened?
I was going between Waigwan and Daegu, which is another major military city there in the central part of Korea. And a Korean bus came around a mountainous road, a curvous road, and I was driving a Japanese Toyo Pet vehicle. And how shall I say, the vehicle, the bus took the whole road up, so there was no place for me to go. And I was nearly killed in that particular accident.
Oh my goodness.
It totaled my car, and I can only thank God for my existence, you know, because I don't know how I kept from going over that mountain.
My goodness. So that was probably one of the most serious things that you probably remember.
It was the most traumatic event that I experienced in my entire military career, I do believe.
Wow. Did you experience any sort of like rewarding or happy memories during your duty?
Well, I got promoted to W-2 while I was there. That was pretty a good thing.
And then what is that?
That's a Chief Warrant Officer 2. You go from a Warrant Officer, which is the initial grade, you become a Chief after you pass the 1 stage. So I was a Chief 2 when I left Korea.
So apart from you being hurt and injured in your accident, were you ever wounded at any other point during your time in Korea?
No.
Did you being in Korea impact your life in any way, or even the Korean War itself, 50 to 53? Did it impact your life?
It impacted my life quite a bit.
And why is that?
Well, I saw the orphanages, and I helped in the orphanages when I was there in Waigwan. I had a male and female child that I sponsored, and I, would do things like buy them toothpaste and soap and toothbrushes, things like that to help their quality of life.
How did you get involved in doing that?
That's a good question. I really don't remember. I think it was in association with some of the soldiers that told me about the orphanage, and if I could help, I wanted to help.
Was there many kids that were orphaned?
It seemed like there were quite a few there.
Have you been back to Korea?
I was in Korea twice.
Right.
Once in 1986, and I came back in September of '87. And 87. I'm sorry. I said 86, 85, and '87. And the first time I was there, it was in 1976.
Right.
And I came back in September of '77.
So have you been back to Korea
Since
since
then,
1985, 86? No.
No, I haven't.
Do you have an opinion or maybe an idea possibly of how we can officially put a closure on the war? Because technically it's still, it's just a ceasefire. We're technically still in war. Do you have any idea on how we can put a closure on it?
You have a military solution and you have a political solution. I don't know. I don't know anything about politics, so I don't pretend to be political. So I'm not a negotiator. I'm a fighter. I'm a warrior. So basically, if it comes to any kind of solution to the Korean situation, it would have to be a uniting of the North and the South.
Whenever you were in Korea, were they still recovering from the war, maybe physically? Was there still remnants of, buildings that had, been damaged or anything?
Most of that area was agricultural, where I was actually initially stationed. The town was it's difficult to describe because when you go to different countries, and I've been to many, you see the poverty, you see the wealth, and there's a large disparity between the two.
So you had no prior knowledge really of what had happened between 50 to 53.
I
So
knew that there was a war, but go ahead.
Yeah, so when did you, or how did you hear about it, learn about it more anyways?
About the Korean War? Mainly through history, TV, things of that nature.
So did they teach about it in school at all whenever you were growing up and before your enlistment? Were they teaching it in schools yet?
Well, they weren't teaching. They were more teaching World War I and World War II back then.
Yeah.
Korea was a recent event that happened in the 50s. So, and I was in school, I think I was in like the first grade in the 50s.
Do you have any messages for younger generations, or do you feel that it's important for younger generations anyways to know the sacrifices and contributions made in Korea?
I think that there were sacrifices of many soldiers that are traumatized and still suffering today from that war and all the other wars that we fought.
Do you think that it's important and necessary for us to preserve these the interviews of these veterans and their legacy?
Very important. Very important. Yes, I do.
And why do you think, in your opinion, the Korean War is known as the Forgotten War?
Well, it was after the big one, World War II, and a lot of soldiers that came out of Korea never got the benefits or the just treatment that they should have gotten from being what they called at that time battle shock or battle fatigue. I think the military environment is a great environment, great experience, and I would think every American should, how should I say, experience it. But it is a traumatic experience when you have to go places and experience different cultures.
Is there anything else, any other stories or memories, messages that you had during your stay, or anything else that you'd like to share to preserve your legacy?
I think Korea is a great place. I don't regret one moment of my time in Korea. I gained a lot of insight that I would never have received had I not experienced that.
I've heard some people say from previous interviews that they believe that the draft should be reincorporated, should be brought back. Do you agree with that?
Yes,
You think that it should be?
yes.
And why, in your opinion?
It develops the youth of our country.
Alright. That sums up for my questions. If
Okay.
there's anything else that you'd like to share, now's the time to do it.
No, that's it.
This is it?
Mm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your service. We appreciate you coming in and talking to us.